And feel free to come on in, those of you who are outside. Welcome back. So our next panel takes a look at the burgeoning YouTube channel partner program, featuring some of its participants, according to the ComScore data ranking of such properties. Many of these new media moguls rely on YouTube as a primary means of distribution for their content. So here to lead this panel, we asked longtime online spin writer Cory Treffiletti. He's a great friend of MediaPost. He's also president and managing partner of the SF-based agency Catalyst SF. So please welcome Cory and panel.
All right. Thank you all for joining us. Yeah, go ahead. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your attention to talk about video today. So this is an interesting topic. It's one that really only has emerged in the last few months, and it's something that is definitely gaining a lot of steam, so it's really a great opportunity for us to talk about it here. To do so, first, I want to just run down the list of the people that we have on the panel to make sure that everybody knows who we've got and the points of view that we're going to be representing. So immediately to my left, we have Barry Blumberg. Barry is the EVP of Alloy Digital and the president of Smosh. Down the line, we have Jay Holzer, who is the Senior Director of Video Production for Demand Media. Then we have Jeremy Lockhorn, who's the VP of Emerging Media and Video Innovation at Razorfish. Then we have Jim Lauterbach, who's the CEO for Revision 3. And then immediately to his left, we have Sanjay Sharma, who is the SVP of Strategy and Business Development / Business Affairs for Machinima. And I think he wins with the longest title.
Just by a few characters, though.
Yeah, just by a couple. So as Ross talked about, the panel that we're going to talk through is YouTube the new MSO? And obviously, when you start talking about comparisons between digital video and television, a lot of people get very excited about it. So the first question I just want to throw out there really is to the audience, or excuse me, to the panel. Does it surprise you that YouTube can amass such a large audience at one time, and do you think it surprised the TV industry? Anybody want to take that and run with that?
I don't think it was surprising at all. You know, I mean, it feels to me that YouTube has been putting up gigantic numbers like since it started. You know, I think it probably did catch some in the TV industry off guard. You know, I think everybody has been trying to figure out how to navigate the online video marketplace in general, and to see those kind of numbers, you know, I could see that kind of catching some people in Hollywood off guard. But it didn't surprise me.
I think the surprise for the TV industry has been how quickly they've gone from cats riding skateboards to you know, it was all Shane Dawson all the time, to actually real content that's brand safe, that's organized into areas that no matter what you're trying to sell or brand, you can create a great space where you're going to get a lot of eyeballs and drive a lot of value. I think it's, you know, the TV industry is still trying to come to grips with that. I think advertisers are as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. The scale has surprised TV, I think, and how quickly it's a mass scale. We've seen numbers growing now on a consistent basis for, to Jim's point, original narrative, episodic programming with production values like TV that sort of mimics TV-like behavior, comes out weekly, people come to see it weekly, and gets numbers that rival certainly cable TV ratings, and that has definitely caught the television industry off guard, I think.
Or, you know, can be as big as broadcast. I mean, we've got shows that do consistently 2 to 3 million views an episode that come out every week. Right. I know you guys with Mortal Kombat and some of your stuff have seen, you know, numbers that are equal if not bigger. So the numbers are there, and it's interesting. I think the other thing about YouTube that's been pretty fascinating for all of us is now that ComScore is rating us as networks inside of YouTube, our numbers are consistent with some of the biggest outside of YouTube video properties. You know, you put us up against ESPN, put us up against MLB, and we're as bigger there as well, and I think that's kind of surprising.
And I think one of the things that's also interesting is that there is some value in cats riding skateboards and all Shane Dawson all the time. TV, you know, a couple years ago we didn't know what to call this, and so it was TV on the internet or make television shows. And you know, I actually think that media has been reinvented, and that people have gotten you know, much better served with the content that they're getting that's more appropriate for them, and that there's value outside of the $2 million an episode or $4 million an episode narrative content. We do, you know, 3 or 4 million views every single week with a show that I don't even want to tell you how much it costs. And you know, we have a regular audience, and advertisers flock to it, and it's something that is appropriate for a group of people.
Maybe that's the real surprise of the YouTube thing. Then is the phenomenon of being able to take the cats and dogs riding skateboards and marry it with this other kind of content, right, and still be successful with it.
I think the other thing that's a little bit surprising is just how niche some of the stuff gets. I mean, some of the shows that Jim does and some of the shows that we do and some of the stuff that Machinima does gets to a very specific audience. And so I think for advertisers looking to reach a very specific, not just demographic audience, but a kind of point of purchase audience, our content gets a lot closer to that audience. And I think that's something that's really gotten the ad industry's attention.
Well, and I want to riff off something Barry said for a minute because I think it's important. If you're looking at YouTube or internet video, a lot of internet video, and thinking, oh, this is just TV on the internet. It's comedies and dramas, and they're 22 and 44 minutes, and it's just going to be the same thing. And it's GRPs, and we're going to measure it the same way. That's wrong. This is a new medium, and you see this with any new medium, right? New media doesn't replace old media, it just changes it, and it figures out what it is and what it's good at. Just like the internet, when I was at magazines, when the internet came out, and we started cowpathing our magazine articles up on the web. And by the way, it's not that way now. Now you've got blogs and Facebook, and it's really come into its own in its own way. Magazines are still there. They still do great things that magazines do. The internet, the text and photo-based internet has developed its own capabilities, its own structure, its own way of telling stories and giving out information. I think we're seeing that with internet video, that we're developing new modes of communicating with video that's nothing like the comedies and dramas on traditional TV.
And you know, I spent 15 years in the television industry before coming over to the digital space, not entirely by choice.
But aren't you glad you're here?
Sorry, yeah. But you know, we're a voyeuristic society, you know, and the internet has allowed us to you know, lower the veil between the creator and the viewer in a way that, you know, television, radio, film never could. And users are connecting with exactly what they want when they want to connect it. And, you know, some of the people up here, you know, our company included, have created entirely new forms of entertainment. And whether it's what Machinima does that couldn't really exist anywhere else, or, you know, some of the very specific stuff that Demand Media does that's for, you know, a certain audience that wants to understand how to do a certain thing. Or for us, where it's, you know, two 17-year-old kids can actually, you know, create a funny video and have a business that spins off of that 5 years later that tells stories in a new way and connects with an audience in a new way. So it's, you know, is YouTube the next MSO? I think it's more than that. We just want to apply old media terms, you know, to what the new thing is, because we don't really have the right words to describe it.
A couple of things that come off of what you're all talking about right now is that having come out of the agency side of the business for so long, one of the biggest things was how do we take money from television and put it into online? And for a very, very long time, it was all about reach and what was the size of the audience. And I remember way back when having a chart and a presentation that said, well, the homepage of Yahoo can amass the same audience that American Idol does. But the big difference was in American Idol, you got the same audience in an hour window, whereas Yahoo's homepage, it took a day to cume that audience. Now, you're starting to see some programs that you're all involved with and that other people are involved with that in one fell swoop, in one showing, are getting the same size of an audience, the same reach as any cable television program. And now, do you think that that changes the conversation? Do you think that disrupts the conversation for an ad buyer in TV and an ad buyer in digital to have to work together a lot more now?
I definitely think that's the case. And for us, you know, Jim mentioned one of our shows, Mortal Kombat. This is really what we saw as a tipping point, where we released this episodic series. It was produced by Warner Brothers, live action. It's showing, I think, buyers that there is the opportunity to have reach, to have scale, to have a tight demo that you were talking about, but not to sacrifice scale to reach that tight demo. So that show in its first episode got something like 4.5 million uniques. It beat every TV show that launched in that same window. It included Game of Thrones, True Blood, Alphas, Falling Skies. Big shows, right? And that, by the way, is with no city buses rolling, no billboards, nothing, right? That's our audience on YouTube, right? So buyers look at that and say, oh, I get it. I can actually advertise against content that is just like television content and yet reach more people with more engagement, with ad units that are interactive and measurable. And so all of that is shifting, and we see that every day. So you can get sort of the brand experience that buyers are looking for on television, but you can also get that reach and global scale that really a video platform like YouTube is uniquely positioned to do. There's not really any other video platforms in the world that can do that.
But it's a really, it's a really hard sell, and we are only a fraction into this. I mean, you're looking at some of the top producers and providers of content on the internet generating, billions of views between us, and yet most of our inventory sits unsold as directly sold at even close to what they would get for television. People are steeped in a way of doing things where they know that a certain number of gross rating points on television is going to yield a certain move in sales of their product, and that's how they're compensated, and that's how they're expected to do their jobs. This is a brave new world, and people, it's about people coming up on the agency side and on the brand side that grew up in a digital environment, because it's very hard to explain some of what we do to people that have done something a certain way for so long.
You know what I think is interesting about how the advertising lays out and whether it's television is when we look at it, the marketing funnel's not dead. You still have branded and awareness and figure something out at the top, which television is really good at, and which a number of the properties that we do, including Mortal Kombat, Epic Mealtime, and others, are really good at. You get a lot of eyeballs seeing something at a short period of time. You've got direct response at the bottom when someone's ready to buy, and so Google AdWords still does a good job with that. Oops, there goes my tablet. Along with other things, but that middle area of the funnel where it's about getting to know a product and getting that experience and really trying it on virtually to see if it really fits you. Magazines have always done a good job with that, and other media in that middle area. Radio, for example, it's a very personal media where people talk directly to you. Well, a lot of internet video, the stuff that we've been creating, and I know other folks here as well, sits in that middle area where we're really providing an in-depth experience and introduction to a brand and how it works. And it replicates in many ways what happens in the print side and in radio, rather than necessarily at that broad reach of what you can do with television and branding. And we've done a lot of work with Ford, for example, where for our audience of young men, Ford wanted to be seen as a technology leader. They wanted to have their Fiesta be test-driven. A number of attributes. And for Ford, when they do a campaign, they move it by a couple percent. It's a huge success. We move their attributes by 30, 40% across our audience. And that was huge for them. And that's not something that's going to happen with a 15 or a 30-second spot. It's something that happens with that deep integration where our trusted hosts talk about a product or a service, and it totally injects it right into their brain. So we got to think about where we fit internet video, new medium, in that marketing funnel, and it isn't necessarily always at the top.
But that brings up a point that was also hit on just a minute ago by Barry, which is that in TV, the inventory gets sold out relatively fast, and then it goes into the spot market and it gets sold. We have lots of inventory online that's not getting sold, and it's not getting sold necessarily at the value that we would all probably want to be sold at. So the question I have is, do you think that this space, the digital space, is going to be able to take on the kinds of production budgets for programs that will then garner those larger advertiser dollars down the line? Or do you think we're going to continue to be sort of a lower priced, lower opportunity vehicle for television advertisers that can't sell to TV to put it up online?
I think that a business will develop for high-ticket production, as Mortal Kombat has demonstrated, that are going to feature shows that are launched directly to an online audience. There will always be, blockbuster movies. There will always be, big, expensive productions, and there's a place for those things. We're waiting for the economics to catch up with that. We were all, the world was, YouTube is a blessing and a curse. So it was the most wonderful thing, and it gave us all the opportunity to have businesses and create content and monetize that content to some degree. But it was also one of the worst things that ever happened to us, because in addition to putting our stuff up, they put up billions and billions and billions of other pieces of content. And an advertiser looked at that, and in the early days, the first 3 or 4 years of YouTube, it was very hard to focus on something that was of value, where you were getting something that you were comfortable having your brand next to. So YouTube wound up pushing prices down to a level that, we may have been comfortable with in the beginning, but we've gotten very uncomfortable with it today. And it's very hard for YouTube, through their sales group, who does a fantastic job when they're direct selling something, but there's a lot of it right now.
Well, I think it comes down to what's the actual value. Why do people advertise? They don't advertise to make high quality experiences. They advertise to sell products. And there are a couple of different things that you do to get to that point of selling products. So I think in the end, if we as an industry, an internet video industry, can show that we sell products as well or better than other advertising medium, we're going to get more money to do it. And I think so far we have failed as an industry to prove that the sorts of things that we do are so much better than all the other forms of advertising out there, and I think they are, that we deserve a lot more money. And it's like, Jeremy and I, we talk off and on all the time, and I don't think we've probably done a good enough job to show you and your clients, although we've worked with a number of your clients, that we are so amazingly better. We're working on that, but I think we all need to do a better job.
I totally agree, and I agree with what both Jim and Barry were saying. And I think the other side of it too is, we look at these shows that are getting millions and millions of views, right, online, and yeah, they're beating individual cable TV programming and whatnot, but it's still hard to buy because I'm very rarely buying, or my TV partners, brethren, are very rarely buying a single cable television program. They're buying a bunch of them, right? And they're buying a huge audience. And it's hard to do that with your stuff, right? Like that, I think, is the other challenge, is like, how do we make that easier to buy in a brand safe way that still gets to more scale than an individual program can deliver, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think what we're focusing on doing is sort of package. It's funny, in a way we're ending up doing a lot of things like the TV business does, right? And we're trying to go to market with upfronts and tentpole programming that gets you sort of this much run of site with this tentpole program, right? You can't buy 2.5 Men on its own usually. They're selling you that show, and you get a lot of other stuff on CBS with that too, right? So that the TV networks figured that out, and they rely on a few shows to carry very high CPMs to sell the rest of their inventory, and that seems to be happening online. But what we're also doing, I think, to Jim's point, is proving the value of that, right? And what those impressions are really worth, and measuring beyond things like click-through rates, but working with partners to say, did it actually increase conversion rates? Did you get more pre-orders of this game because of this campaign, or sign-ups for whatever it is you're promoting? And so far, we're seeing pretty compelling evidence that we can actually capture that, convey it back to an advertiser, and have them come back and do more, right? And a last point, then I'll let you chime in. I think what YouTube is doing that is fantastic is really pushing on that front, right? What their parent company Google did that eviscerated the print business was exactly that, right? They put in a CPC model that just killed everything because it was all performance-based. And they're doing that in video with TrueView and skippable ads, which has become fully a third of all video inventory on YouTube, is telling advertisers, if no one watches the ad, then don't pay for it, right? But if they do watch the ad, you're paying a premium CPM for that ad, right? Sorry, go ahead.
And there are a couple things that are also going on, which is, when somebody walks through our door with $500,000 or $1 million, we become very compliant, and we get asked to do a lot of things sometimes that are counterintuitive because somebody at a brand who's not really engaged in the digital space has decided that Facebook likes for their product are a way of gauging success, and so we sometimes will bend and focus campaigns to deliver against metrics that, if they left it up to us working with the agency, it wouldn't necessarily be that. And it might be a more successful program than trying to deliver against something that doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. The last thing that I want to say, and it's what we're all talking about, which is this is shifting from a buying content to buying media. And so, in the early days and even now, people want more. from this space than they get from television. I used to ask, you know, how do you ever ask when you're buying a TV spot what the click-through rate is? We have to do so much more for the money right now. And our hope, I think all of us, is that advertisers' product can sit next to our product in the same way that it does in other media, and that media in and of itself begins to have some value, or more value than it has today.
It's a bit of like almost a double-edged sword, right? To be able to have these metrics that we can talk about, like click-through rates, and did we move the needle on brand perception, and did we capture a bunch of email addresses and everything? And coming from a digital agency, we've always hung our hats on those kind of engagement metrics, and that resonates with some clients. And yeah, we do have the clients that are going, I need to have 1 million Facebook fans by the end of the year. And then there's a weird conversation about like, okay, well then what are you going to do, and what does that mean? And but so like when what'd you say?
Then they want 2 million.
Right, exactly, yeah. But so a lot of times as you get farther and farther up the chain at the marketing organization on the client side, you get to the CMO level, and it's like, how many GRPs did I get? Because I know I've got 50 years of econometric modeling that tells me that if I do that, then I'm going to get X in terms of return, right? And so we've got to find a way to balance these two different kind of worlds here. And I don't want to get into the GRP debate, but like there has to be some merger of the two, because we've got to speak in a common language that the marketers can understand, but we've also got to represent the value, the extra value that's getting.
So you opened up the door. You don't want to go there, but I will.
Pretend I didn't say that.
No, it's tied to a different question, which is that flip this around for a second. We don't have anybody up here who represents standard Hollywood. So my first question is, and this is a two-part question. The first question is that we're sitting here talking about, is YouTube the new MSO? On the flip side, do you think anybody in Hollywood cares? Do you think that they really look at it as, oh, are they rising up to become the next MSO? Or is it still below the radar and they still take themselves far too seriously? And then secondarily, what can we do to get a seat at the big kids table? Because that's really what the question is how do you get involved to get the money that would be going towards NBC, ABC, CBS, Bravo, Lifetime? How do you get that money? How do you get a seat at that table?
I think a lot of it has to do with the barrier to entry to those different mediums. So right now, if you want a show on cable or broadcast television, there are certain channels that have to go through to get your content in those places. And what I think we'll see over the next 5 or 10 years is as more connected TV devices come out and as iPads become a more prevalent way of consuming content, that the content that's produced by those entities and the content that is produced by what we would describe as like self-published content will sit next to each other. And so the best content will truly win, and it'll be more of a democratized content landscape. And so I think that shift will help pull those dollars over a little bit. But I think there's still a lot of advancement that has to happen before that can happen.
And I think that we have to wait for the population to get a little older.
Yes.
So, I grew up in a universe that was pre-cable, and when cable came along, I would watch television, and there was a differentiation in my brain between channels 2 through 13 and anything that went beyond that, and I knew that it was cable. And the generation after me didn't differentiate, and this is, I was in the kids business, and so this is the Nickelodeon generation, that Nickelodeon or CBS or there was no difference. It was they were all just channels on the television set. I watch how my son consumes media, and whether my son is playing the Wii or on an iPad or watching a television show or a YouTube video on a computer, there's no difference to him. It's just consumption of media. And I think that, that generation, the generation that's coming up, they're not differentiating. They're consuming media. I think that we hear the term any screen a lot. And, I think that we are seeing, finally this merger of content is content, and it doesn't really matter where you're getting it.
Yeah, every glowing rectangle in your life is going to be a media and a video consumption device, from smallest smartphone to biggest smart TV, that screen in your car. Yes, you'll be watching video on it as you drive down the road. I mean, that's why I wanted to bring this up, because I think one of the things that's going to drive it is the tablet is going to become very much of a primary media and video consumption device. And I think that this fall we're going to see that Amazon's Kindle Fire is going to be the best-selling device of Christmas, and it's going to radically change how people consume video, and more people are being, because it doesn't matter. Like if give me your phone. if I have the phone here, right? Right? And I have the tablet here, or I have the TV where that is, the screen size to me is the same size. It's consuming the same amount of my visual representation. And now they're at the point where we're not really at retinal displays. We're sort of there. Where the resolution's the same. It doesn't matter where the screen is. What it matters is your context and where you're watching it and how many people you're sharing it with.
And shared audience experience is a big deal. So, going to a movie is a different experience than watching something on television. And watching something on television time shifted is a different experience than everybody watching Friends at 8 o'clock at night on NBC and talking about it the next day. And we've actually brought it back to, a shared audience experience. When we release a video, or when some of our videos come out, when an Epic Mealtime video comes out, everybody's watching that at the same time and talking about it, not the next day at the water cooler, but in the comments, on the Facebook page, on the website. It is this immediacy that the entertainment industry had never seen before.
That's really interesting to me because, I think one of the core underlying issues with this is, it's not, Hollywood maybe isn't too concerned about YouTube as the next MSO. What they are concerned about is how do I figure out on-demand distribution, right? And they're wrestling with that. And there's clear indications, and I agree with what everybody's saying about sort of any screen is going to have video content, and consumers want their stuff anytime, anywhere, on any device, right? They don't care what it is. It's I'm watching that show, and I don't care where I'm getting it from. I just want to watch it now. And then the sort of immediacy and sort of linear programming thing kind of runs opposite to that, right? It's like you're kind of moving towards this on-demand world, but then you're seeing more and more people interacting at the same time when that thing is released. And for right now, it seems like Hollywood, while they're dabbling, in a lot of cases with on-demand content, it also seems that the way that they're trying to use digital right now is to drive back to live viewing, to engage with that sort of, because that's where they're making the money right now, right? Is it with the initial airing of the program? So it's more about how do we use digital and social to drive back to, live real-time viewing. And it's interesting to see those two things fight against each other.
I think we all, that have been in this for a while, have understood that as soon as anybody sees a new media property, you want to try to figure out how to drive it back into an old media model, right? How do I make that internet show that's so successful into a television show? How do I impose television metrics on the internet? Because we go with what we know. We're comfortable talking about things and experiencing things in a certain way, and so we go back to this old thing. I look at on demand and I say, God, that just feels like a tiny intermediate step to me of, it's just the next evolution of TiVo. For me, this is really about, and YouTube does this and is pushing forward with other Google products to try to create a whole new way of experiencing entertainment, of interacting with your peers around that entertainment, and it, it's really, going back to what, our ancestors would do sitting around a campfire.
But one thing to keep in mind is that people like what's easy, right? And right now the business, as you're pointing out, Jeremy, it's going towards an on-demand model. So is it possible that YouTube just becomes an on-demand platform for all the cable TV and all the primary network shows, so that they can house them on their own websites, but maybe you can also watch all of these on YouTube, and it just becomes literally another MSO. It's a on-demand platform for everyone. Is that feasible?
Our company produces Gossip Girl and Vampire Diaries and a bunch of other shows I've never seen. But they're very good, I'm told, if you're a
Wrong demo.
18 to 34-year-old woman. But somebody told me that, and I think that it is Vampire Diaries, that when it goes on television, it does 1.1 million viewers or whatever it is, and in the 24-hour period after the episode is on television, it does the same viewership on the CW website. So the same number of people are consuming it in both places. And I think it's running on the CW website with the ads that are sold via television, and I think it's all priced the same. But that's pretty amazing to think about, you're equaling your television numbers online.
One area I think that Hollywood is paying attention. I think you're right. Digital has sort of been the stepchild at most studios for a while. But increasingly, at least the studios we work with as development partners or as distributors, their digital departments are getting injected with their own development money. They're creating their own original productions. Many of them are original IP that the TV arm or film arm of the studio really don't do anymore. The studios have, you'll see Spider-Man 10 and Transformers 15, but it's very rare that you'll see an original screenplay turned into a movie, right? And so aside from the disruption in the distribution model that we're seeing happen through different screens and through YouTube primarily, there's a disruption happening in the development model that Hollywood has used forever, right? So you put $5-6 million into a pilot, right? And you'll spend millions of dollars marketing that pilot, and then you hope that it's good and gets the viewership, right? You'll spend $100 million on a movie and $50 million to market it, and then wait for opening box office numbers to come in. And I think what a lot of studios are seeing is you'll see a short that gets 10 million views on YouTube. That turns into a web series. That's what happened with Mortal Kombat, right? The director was an established dance choreography guy. He directed Fame and Glee. He wanted to be an action director, right? And no one in Hollywood would let that guy direct an action movie, right? So he made this short film, Mortal Kombat, called in favors, 6 minutes long, and it did huge numbers. He got 2 calls from Warner Brothers, one from legal saying cease and desist, right? And the other from Warner Brothers Digital saying come in and talk to us, right? So he pitched this idea. They loved it. They funded a 10-part series that's 90 minutes long, just like a film, right? And from the success it saw online now, the studio has greenlit a feature film that he's directing, right? So talent is seeing that and saying, okay, this is not just a medium for me to like screw around with little pet projects. This is actually a transformative medium for my career, for established talent, right? And that development model is very organic, right? That's what the internet does, is put something out there and iterate on it.
And let's talk, and at the lowest possible level, in some respects, a kid in Nebraska sped up his voice and talked into a camera and made the stupidest videos that I've ever seen in my life. That was turned into the most successful movie on Nickelodeon in the history of the network. And I think the second one came out this week or is coming out this week. But it just, there's no old medium. And in fact, they couldn't get anybody to really get behind that. So the producer and the agency wound up financing that film. And, there's a lot that is transformative, as you said. It's changing the way that you look at the digital space.
Well, you brought up a minute ago this might be a generational thing. You're saying this might take some time. How long is this going to take before the effects of what we're seeing in these reports affects the cable industry and the digital video industry all sort of being on the same level?
Well, I think it's starting, and you see the numbers start to decline for traditional cable. It's maybe not cord cutting, but cord shaving. I think over the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to see a lot more stuff going direct over IP. We're going to see cable MSOs that are virtual, that are unbundled from the transport, that are starting to go direct over IP, that are going to change that model around a lot. So I don't think I don't think we have to wait until the 12-year-olds are having babies and moving to suburbia. I think it's going to happen over the next few years.
I think we've already
There's a show
seen
about
it.
that, actually. It's already happening.
I mean, I think we've already seen it with the audience migration. I mean, the television business and the movie business are, really, really tough businesses right now. They're having a hard time making it. Our business is, has more content than we know what to do with. And, I just anecdotally, my friend runs a TV studio and he made a TV show, and that show went on a cable network, and it was the highest rated pilot episode that cable network had ever aired. Now, he spent about $4 million on this episode, and I said, how many people watched it? And he said 1.1 million people. I'm like, we spent like $2,000 and had 3 million viewers on Friday. You know, it's just it's just
Is he still
a
friends with
different. But believe me, the smart people in the television industry are just doing what they're doing for as long as they can do it.
Well, and look, I remember hearing the exact same thing in the print business and the music business, right? We're just going to hold on for a couple more years until we retire. It's all going to be good. And, you know, so it's changing.
I do want to open up and see if anybody in the room has any questions for the panel. So Ross has a microphone. Does anybody have anything they want to ask about? There's another one in the back here. A question down here. The tall gentleman named Jason.
In blue. Thanks. This was an informative panel. Jason Schulman with Adapt TV. Just a quick question. It won't be the first panel that I've seen, and probably not the last, where there's, you know, as Cory says, folks don't want to go through this door of the GRP, cost per point, TRP, common measurement across all platforms. There's always the agency guy on the stage who says that it's needed. Certainly from where I sit, I think it's needed. I hear Jim say, you know, in the beginning, and Machinima quoting big numbers, and being in the video space, I know there are big numbers out there. So I guess what I'm getting to is why not the GRP? It's a gross rating point. It's a measurement against a target audience, nothing more. It's simple math on the back of a napkin. And if you are drawing a big enough audience, and you know the Procter & Gamble brand managers, Unilever, et cetera, are using that as their metric, why are we running from it?
The problem with GRP is what you do after it. So GRP, you take and you apply an OTS or an OTV on top of that to say, okay, how many times do I need to expose somebody to this ad to have a statistically significant number on my spreadsheet that says that my target audience saw it. So typically that means you got to run it 5 or 10 times against your target audience before you can guarantee that they actually saw it. Well, look what happens with TrueView, which Sanjay was talking about. Look what happens with when somebody goes out and specifically says, I want to watch Epic Mealtime or Mortal Kombat or Smosh or whatever, and I hit that button and a pre-roll pops up and I'm like, 15 seconds, okay, I'll watch. My show's on. That doesn't need an OTS of 5 or 10. It's kind of an OTS of 1. So the GRP, yeah, it's got some value, but it's what happens after that and how it factors in the calculation that I think needs to change.
Totally agree. The GRP fails to capture the engagement perspective simply, right? It's a very different, you know, and I hate to throw, because I'm already using cliched terms, as you pointed out, but it's a lean forward medium, right? And we've seen that. We've seen, you know, studies that we do on brand impact metrics online exceed what we see, you know, with TV spots. And so there is this inherent recognition, and even clients that are GRP loyalists will recognize that, you know, there is an inherent additional piece of value to the online world. So until we can find a way to make it capture that, it fails to be sort of, you're comparing apples to oranges, basically.
We have another question back here.
Yeah, I'm Erin McDermott from OMD. So I totally agree with you. I've worked in digital for a long time. But, you know, you ask how to get a seat at the big kids table. I mean, I really think that you're contradicting yourselves in some ways, because you're saying that, you know, we're getting the same number of views online as we do on TV. Or, you know, the experience here on my phone is the same as the experience on the TV. And I think at the end of the day, like, you guys need to band together and come to, you know, the advertisers and say, you know, we're not only going to evolve this online GRP, but we're going to evolve the TV GRP. There has to be an evolution across the board. Because we do, at the end of the day, we do have to give some sort of apples to apples comparison. And at the end of the day, we are all trying to do the same thing. We're trying to move product. So I really think there has to be an evolution from the digital side online, but also maybe from TV as well. And maybe that experience, you know, gets evolved into a new number.
I think, you know, I mean, part of the issue, I don't disagree with you. I think that, you know, our sales efforts are fragmented. So we don't all sell our own media. YouTube sells some of our media. We sell some of our media ourselves. Some of our media goes out via AdSense and is passive and various other services. We have, you know, in our case, and I'm sure some of your cases, we have other partners that sell our media on different devices. And so it's hard for us to band together when, you know, in our case, there are, people with self-interest. We're aligned with their self-interests on their player or on their website, but it's hard really to get consensus with everybody on the same page. It would help if YouTube and Google got on the same page, but YouTube and Google, frankly, and they wouldn't disagree with my saying this, they feel like they're going to make their own page and that the rest of the world is going to come around to their way of thinking and their way of seeing things.
Anybody else want to hit that one?
I would just, I think it has to be a collaboration, right? And there are challenges to it for sure, but I think it's got to be even bigger than just the publishing side of the house, right? I think we need to get the agency side and the client side together and run some tests and do some experimentation and figure out how we can model this.
You guys stand minimums, so it's almost like the networks aren't going to help you.
Right.
So you guys need to come and say, for us to get a seat at the table, here's this metric that we're going to use to keep things on the travel.
Well, I think what you're saying is what we have to show you is that we can move product better than they can. Yeah. And that, GRP is sort of a proxy in many ways for moving product because there's a lot of history with it. And there's, you can run your spreadsheets and have a reasonable, a coefficient correlation that you're going to be able to move product at a particular GRP. We need to be able to do the same thing, and whether it's, streams served or ads clicked or whatever, and I don't know what it is, and that's why I think the research is essential to prove it. But it sounds like what I'm hearing from you is come to us with that thing that shows that you move product better than anything else, and that's how you get the seat. Is that right?
I think so. I would think that's the way for you guys to be able to play, with the big dogs. Eventually our money is still with TV because we have this one number that goes across the board. We can say doing this equals this. And I know there's so many different pieces, obviously, to digital, but it's almost like if CMOs don't have time to say, oh, well, this little program on YouTube has different goals than something else. At the end of the day, we need it all to do the same thing because at TV we're able to do that right now. And we're able to have this one metric that we know works. And we can test things and they can, lead the likes or whatever it is, subscribers. But it feels like that there has to be that one thing and then all of a sudden everyone's playing the same game.
I think that goes back to our saying we are very acquiescent at times in delivering what the paying customer is asking us for.
So, that's a good topic to end the discussion on because I don't think we're going to resolve it today, but it definitely has to continue in a lot of other conversations for the next days, months, weeks, and years. So please give a round of applause to the panel. And thank you for paying attention.
Thanks, Cory. Thanks, panel.